Welcome back to the Artie Lange Show. My next guest is a great friend of the show, and we appreciate his time all the time. He's like our go-to guy when someone in the world of entertainment dies, but especially someone like this. This is a guy who just passed yesterday, a Chicago guy, a Second City TV guy. And listen, maybe not a lot of younger people know him, but you're talking about a guy who in some capacity was involved in almost every influential comedy movie of the 70s and 80s as either a writer, director, or an actor, or a producer. Harold Ramis dies of sort of a mysterious illness at the age of 69. And I'll get into his resume in a little bit, but to talk about that is Richard Roeper joining us. What's up, Rich?
Hey, Artie, I know I'm starting to feel like we're the merchants of death when, like, great talents die, but, I mean, you know, it's an honor to talk about the legacy of people like Philip Seymour Hoffman, and now today we're talking about Harold Ramis.
No, you know, when I saw this today, when I woke up, I was real sad as a guy, you know, a guy I never met before, but just as a fan of comedy, the first thing I said to Danny Filato, I said, can we get Richard? Yeah. You know, obviously, because you're the guy to talk to. But, I mean, just listen to this guy's resume. Co-wrote Animal House, probably at the age of about 23 years old. Yeah. Co-wrote Animal House, co-starred in the movie Stripes with Bill Murray, wrote and directed Groundhog Day, co-wrote and directed Caddyshack, co-wrote and directed Analyze This and That, co-starred in and co-wrote Ghostbusters with Dan Aykroyd. Okay, that's right there. I mean, lights out. You're talking about a guy who's not only worth probably about $300 million, is just as big a comedic influence as you could get, right? I mean...
yeah, absolutely. You and I talk about movies all the time, and you look at the early 70s for dramas like The Godfather and Mean Streets and Taxi Driver and all that. The golden age of comedy would be, 78 through, like, the late 80s. But in that zone... Harold Ramis is Babe Ruth. I mean, he's a factor in all of those films.
You're right.
Which they're not only great on their own, Artie, but they're influencing everybody. You know, whether it's Judd Apatow or Seth MacFarlane, everybody's saying that, like, Harold Ramis is one of the go-to influences. I mean, the streak he had is almost unprecedented.
Right. I was 11 years old in 78 when Animal House came out. And, I'm 46 now, so every one of my friends who were fans of comedy has quoted lines that Harold Ramis either directed, wrote, or said in a movie.
Yeah.
I'm sure, John, you're a little younger than me, but that's true of you too, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's got to be, yeah.
Yeah, big deal.
I'm curious, the younger people like James and Shane, guys about 30 years old now. Did you know who Harold Ramis was? Did you know? You knew it was.
Definitely.
Well, you guys are in the business. I mean, you wanted to be in the business.
I never knew his full background in directing and writing, though. I mean, Ghostbusters is obviously one of my favorite movies. So.
Well, listen, you got that. And also an early member, in the 70s, a member of Second City TV when it had its heyday. He worked with John Belushi and Bill Murray,
Yeah, he actually, he grew up in Chicago. His parents had like a liquor and grocery store on the west side of Chicago. He was a Chicago guy. And early 70s, again, talk about a golden age, Second City, it was Belushi, it was Bill Murray. And Harold Ramis, he famously said the moment he stepped on stage with John Belushi, he knew, okay, I'm not going to ever be that big a star as a performer, but I could be the setup guy. I could be the guy that serves it up. Right. He knew that about himself. He's actually, I think he's almost underrated, though, like on screen. Like one of my favorite scenes in Stripes is John Candy, who's talking about why he joined the Army.
Yeah.
He's like, I swallow a lot of pizzas, along with a lot of aggression.
Yeah.
And Harold Ramis is next to him. Doesn't have one line of dialogue.
Make it all face expression. His facial expressions. Right. What, you got a 6 to 8 month training program
Which
here?
is perfect for me.
Real tough one, right?
And Artie, the fact that, here's the thing. We're quoting the lines. You know the lines.
Yeah.
Everybody knows Cinderella story from Caddyshack. All the lines from Animal House, And he had such a hand in all of these films. It's amazing. Right.
Well, it really, really just as good a resume as you could get in the world of comedy in the golden age of comedy. And, Danny Filato is, we mentioned this before. It's not so much of a secret. He's got a close friendship with Bill Murray. And he told me something today that I was really disappointed to hear, that until last year, because this was sort of a mystery illness. He got some sort of infection. It wasn't cancer, an infection that attacked his immune system that he eventually succumbed to.
Right.
But for like 12 years or 13 straight years, him and Bill Murray had a falling out on the set of Groundhog Day. And it lasted to where they didn't speak, Dan, for what, 14 years? Give me the details.
Something like that, yeah. And
they didn't talk.
Right.
And Howard Ramis actually called you a couple times.
He would call for Bill's number.
And you couldn't give it to him.
And I couldn't give it to him.
Right.
And you don't know what it's like to be, 35 or 36 years old and not to be able to give out a number to Ernie Banks, who called my house a couple of times.
Right.
Mayor Daley, who called my house a couple of times. And then Harold Ramis.
Right.
Co-wrote Back to School, one of my favorites of all time.
By the way, Dan, for the record, Ernie Banks can have my number.
Okay. And
no, but that
I had to say no.
Times, but that's a whole other story. But, Dan, when you're in between Harold Ramis and Bill Murray, you're basically it's like Lennon trying to call McCartney.
Right,
exactly.
You're right.
You're Yoko Falato at that point.
That's a perfect analogy in the world of comedy. And when you would say to Bill Murray how Ramis was trying to get in touch with you, what would he say?
Yeah, I'll call him. And then.
So it was that deep of a falling out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the odd thing is, when you look at it, Groundhog Day, which is one of those movies that, as the years go by, gets even
amazing
more prestige.
Yeah.
It was probably the first movie where people saw that Bill Murray, he had done some other things where he tried to do more than just comedy, but that was the moment where people realized that Bill Murray could be more than just Bill Murray. I mean, it was a great role.
Right.
15 years later, he's doing Lost in Translation. So whatever their falling out was, that's going to be on Bill Murray's tombstone, one of his 5 best movies.
Exactly. And listen, Bill Murray's 5 best movies, Howard Ramis is involved in at least 3 of them. You got Caddyshack, you got Stripes, and you got Groundhog Day. And then Ghostbusters, as far as success is concerned.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about 2 major collaborators who, it was hard to hear that as a fan, that they had that big of a falling out.
Yeah, and the other thing about Harold too, it's I got to know him a little bit. I don't know if people, everybody knows this. I mean, a few people might, but when Roger Ebert got sick and we had various kind of celebrity co-hosts on Ebert and Roeper, Harold Ramis filled in.
Oh, no kidding!
So I got to sit in the balcony of Ebert and Roeper with Harold Ramis, and he was so great.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember the movies, but I know at one point it was a comedy, and he eviscerated it. And I was sitting there thinking, "Oh my God, can you imagine being whoever directed that movie?" Going, Harold Ramis, but he had the guts to do that.
Right.
Every other guest critic we had who worked in the world of show business, after we finished the show, would say, "Man, that was kind of tough. I really didn't want to, say too much. And boy, I have new respect for what you guys do." And Harold Ramis looked at me and he goes, "You call this work?" It was such a great line,
Well, listen, you got to know what you're talking about. Then it doesn't seem like work if you know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
But I just read this in his resume too. He talked about modern day stuff where he had success. He was Seth Rogen's dad at Knocked Up, and Judd Apatow obviously cast him because he was a huge fan of his. But here's, as a guy who's, dabbled in trying to make movies in Hollywood, here's the biggest piece of sort of comedic props I could give him. When you look at a movie like Analyze This, where you go, okay, producers and executives go, okay, we got this idea for a script, an idea for a movie. We're going to pitch it to De Niro. He's the only guy who could pull this off. It's going to be a parody of everything he's ever done. And we're going to make it a full-blown comedy. Basically the comedic version of The Sopranos, where a guy, do you know how easily in the hands of the wrong director that could have been the worst piece of crap? Like, it could have been so terrible and hacky and bad with the wrong director. But with a guy as brilliant as Hal Ramis, knowing where to hit all the right moments and direct him and Billy Crystal, it's perfect. It's a perfect comedy.
It really is. And that was, the other thing about Harold, after that, incredible streak he had. And you're right, Artie, he must, the money he must have made because he had a piece in all these films.
Yeah.
He wanted to do things his way. And in 1996, at the height of his fame, he moved back to the Chicago area.
Right, I heard that,
I want to live here because he didn't want his kids to have that kind of Hollywood upbringing, and he just wanted to have a more normal guy existence. And he had enough clout to do it. So even though he was Harold Ramis' legend, he was also the guy you'd see at the corner bakery,
Right.
And, he just lived his life here for all these years.
Well, that's one of the things I love about Chicago, the times I go back, and I've only been there on weekend trips to do stand-up. I got a chance to make a movie in San Francisco once for 2 months, which was great, but I always wanted to have that experience in Chicago because I love how provincial it is. I love how it's there. It's your town, and you could get up and live that life of the city. You go and you get a cup of coffee, you walk around, and it's real people. And someone who leaves that LA lifestyle to do that, you got to have a lot of respect for.
I would see him all the time at Liz and Marie's Walgreens.
Oh, okay,
Because
really?
he lived right back in the Deerfield Highland Park area.
Trying to pick up some of the bulls?
Yeah.
But that's the other thing, too, Artie. It's like we're also, Chicagoans are very protective of people like that who come back home. So it's like, they'll let him live his life, and it's kind of an unspoken thing. Billy Corgan, Filato probably knows this. Like, Billy Corgan is like now opening like a tea shop, in Chicago.
Yeah.
And it's like people just like, okay, Billy Corgan wants to do that. You're not going to go in there and bug him. You're not going to bring in your Smashing Pumpkins Siamese Dream CD and ask him to sign it, because the people around him will be like, leave him alone. Let him have his life.
Right. I didn't even realize he's a Chicago guy. Is he, Corgan? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many people are. Well, listen, here's the statement Bill Murray gave out officially to Time Magazine through his lawyer, and he's getting a lot of crap on Twitter because it sounds kind of cold. And I got to say, I mean, listen, what do you say in a situation like this? And I'm not going to, bash Bill Murray for this. I don't know anything going on. It's none of my business. But it does sound like, for what they did together, this being the statement, maybe something happened between the two guys. Basically, Bill Murray said, Howard Ramis and I together did the National Lampoon Show, Off-Broadway, Meatball, Stripes, Caddyshack, Ghostbusters, and Groundhog Day. He earned his keep on this planet. God bless him. Now, listen, that's short, but it's pretty much to the point. I mean, do you expect more from him, Richard, or is that,
Yeah, he earned his keep on this planet, and, listen, yeah, I mean, honestly, to me, whatever, I don't know, Bill Murray is the way he is.
Right.
But all I know is everybody who ever worked with Harold Ramis that I've ever talked to, my experiences with him, whatever their falling out was, my guess is it's more Bill Murray than Harold Ramis.
That's what a lot of people, I'm sure, might say. Yeah, I mean, listen, you don't know. And Danny doesn't even seem to know a lot of the details of it. I mean, maybe you do. But
I know a few.
But you don't want to say anything?
No.
Okay. All right, which might lead me to believe that you're right, Richard.
Maybe not.
No, maybe not. No, listen. I mean, you're talking about major egos here, but I know Bill Murray, as brilliant as he is, does have a rep for maybe being difficult sometimes.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Harry Shearer wrote Club Paradise, and Harold took it and chewed up the entire script and said, "Hey, I'll put your name on it." And Harry goes, "No, no way."
Okay.
Well, there's no doubt about the fact that Harold Ramis knew exactly what he wanted to do, and he did not, mind bruising some egos in pursuit of his vision, and that's fine. That's how you have to be. It's not like he was just hugging everybody forever and saying, "Hey, what's your opinion?" When it was his film, it was his film. So egos clash. The great thing is, whatever happened between Bill Murray and Harold Ramis on the set of Groundhog Day, it's a great movie.
That should happen.
Great movie.
It should happen more often.
That matters. It's the same thing like we talk about music. Whatever kind of feuds were going on, if the album is great, who cares? Right.
It should happen more often.
Yeah.
I mean, it should have happened between Vince Vaughn and whoever directed The Delivery Man.
Wow.
That should have. I mean, listen, I like Vince, but hopefully they would have the same problems. I think that'd help the movie.
You can't have creative differences if you don't have creative people.
No, listen, I got to tell you, man, I haven't been in this business for 20 years now, making a living at comedy. For all the tensions you hear from the world of music, drama, sports, there is no more easily bruised ego than that of a comedian or a comic. I mean, it can really get people tense about each other and can really cause rifts.
Especially when you have, a great comedic director and writer like Harold Ramis, but there probably were some moments where you thought, well, I'm not going to be as big of a star as some of these guys because I don't have that certain charisma or something. So who knows? You could see how that could be a problem.
Right. And some of the most touching comments about John Belushi over the years in some of these documentaries have always been made by Harold Ramis. He talked. The last time he ever saw him was at a party in L.A., and it's a pretty poignant thing the way he puts it. And listen, it shows you he goes back that far. He was there, like in all these major comedy moments from the mid-'70s on. At the party was Harold Ramis. He was there, man. And a big part of it. Yeah. Well, listen, and again, a Chicago guy. And just he left too early. When you look at a guy like Carl Reiner, guy like 90 still making people laugh. Mel Brooks, he probably had a lot more left in him, so it sucks. But
absolutely,
yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, Richard. I appreciate it.
All right, Artie. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, talk to you real soon. Again, Hal Ramis, gone, and as good a comedy resume as you could possibly imagine. So rest in peace, and We'll be back after this.
The Artie Lange Show, weeknights on Audience, only on DirecTV.